Welcome to the Doctors Making a Difference podcast. Doctors change lives every day, but what happens when life changes yours? A single injury, a sudden illness, your career, your income, your future can shift in an instant. The best physicians don't just plan for success, they protect it. At Set for Life Insurance, they believe financial security isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. True own occupation disability insurance ensures that no matter what happens, your future stays in your hands. Because protecting your income means protecting everything you've built. Visit drpodcastnetwork.co/set for life today. Secure your future before life makes the choice for you. I'd like to introduce Todd Otten, who is here today joining us in the podcast. Todd, would you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Sure. My name's Todd Otten. I'm a husband, father, survivor, family physician, and lately a bit of a troublemaker in a good way, I would say, in the healthcare space.
Nice. A self-described troublemaker. Well, and I want to actually we'll explore some of this as we go through this with Todd, but I want to kind of plant this idea in the minds of our listeners. Todd is an interesting guy. Not only has he been a successful physician, he's written a book. He was able to be financially successful as a family doctor enough that he could change direction in his 40s. And I just guess I want to lay the foundation as people are listening to this kind of stuff. Sometimes people feel a little bit hopeless or trapped. And Todd Otten is a guy who's done all this stuff and at a pretty early age been able to say, look, I'm financially secure, I'm passionate about what I do, and I'm focused on patients. And I want to hear the journey. I think this is a pretty fascinating journey for how you got where you're at and what you're working on now, Todd.
Well, thanks so much. I think there's probably a few things that allowed me to do that. One of them is risk taking, I suppose. I think I was about 9 when I learned how to play poker. And I was like, "Oh, this isn't all about luck. There's some skill involved with this. I kind of like this idea of the calculated risks, if you will." And then that kind of spurred on this interest in investing really at a young age. I was interested in the stock market and how it worked and numbers and all those kinds of things. And so that allowed me to get into multiple different avenues of investment over the years, whether it was traditional stock market, 401k, what have you. But those really were the vehicles that allowed me to have the financial freedom. I think there's probably three big components to that. I would say one, I was a Navy physician. And so I was blessed to get out of undergraduate without any debt, for a couple of reasons. But then medical school was paid for by the government. And so when I didn't have any debt getting out of medical school, which is a huge relief, if you will. But really the two things that really accelerated the ability to save some money and do other things and give back in different ways beyond just seeing patients were real estate. Did relatively well with real estate. And then I done exceedingly well with cryptocurrency and the blockchain. And that was by far the biggest win. When you have an investment that goes up 300x, not 300%, but 300x, I mean, that's a massive return that you're getting back. And then you can deploy that capital in other ways. But by doing that, Peter, and taking those calculated risks, if you will, it allowed me to stand up for myself when I was, frankly, in my opinion, being mistreated in the vein of advocating for others. Like I wasn't even advocating for myself. Granted, I was probably a little passive aggressive at times, like emails to the CEO that say, appears your siloed approach and top down approach isn't working, wasn't necessarily well received, but it did give me the courage to stand up for myself and stand up for others. And I think maybe the beauty of that, and hopefully I'm not talking too long, is we're out there. There's people who have taken these risks and done these things and are willing to talk about it and have conversations and offer ideas or point you to coaches or whatever. I'm not suggesting everybody go through burnout like I did. And I'm not suggesting everybody to tell their boss to take their job and shove it, resign the next morning per se. But you can, and you can come out on the other side and be okay. Having lived through that.
Oh yeah, no. So let's back up and kind of tell the tale here a little bit.
Sorry,
Todd, that's okay. So Todd wrote a book. I've got a copy of it here. It's called The Ripple of Change, and I read through it. It's quite an interesting book, and that I guess I want to hear going back. some of the stuff you describe in the book, but talk a little bit about your journey to becoming a physician and some of the unmet needs that you found, and what led to burnout, and eventually what led to this book, because I think that informs this whole discussion of what makes you tick. And this podcast is called Doctors Making a Difference, and obviously you're very committed to doing that. And I'd like to hear more about that journey, kind of from young Todd to Dr. Otten, and then to today.
You know, oh wow, it interesting, Peter. I've got another project I'm in the works on, and it's helped me understand during my formative years some of those things that occurred that led me to wanting to give back to others and wanting to help others, and really probably looking for somewhat of perpetual external validation, if you will. There were some traumatic things that occurred in my youth, and we won't get into that, that kind of led me to wanting to achieve at the highest levels. And obviously, being a physician is a significant achievement, right? And so, very early on, I loved science, I loved interacting with people, but I think it was some of those traumatic experiences that were subconsciously driving me to maybe one of the highest professions in the land, if you will. And the second interesting part of that, so you get it, you go through college, you go through medical school, all those things. And then when I trained, probably around the same time as you, it looks like I've got some, a few more gray hairs to show for
All
it.
mine just fell out. So yeah, right.
So, anyways, see, there's a calculated risk in making that comment, but I thought we'd
Yeah,
be
yeah,
okay with
right,
it.
right.
So, in medical school, we were taught to just really stuff everything in a box. And I don't know about you, but I really was never taught what to do with that box. It was just keep stuffing it in there and keep stuffing it in there, and that's all well and good. And I think it's important that you're able to put your feelings aside and really focus on the person in front of you when the time requires it, right? We don't want to be doing a C-section and our mind is off in la la land. We want to be focused at the task at hand. But if something goes wrong and there's a traumatic event or there's some trauma in your life, you have to have time and the place and the resources to come back to that, to process that. And honestly, I never did that. From being in medical school in my early 20s to even just in the last year and a half, I never processed any of it. I just kept shoving stuff in a box. And then in 2019, again, more in the box, more in the box, more in the box. And all these little warning signs of burnout were happening. Struggling. My empathy was going down. I didn't want to see patients as much. I was short tempered. My family wasn't getting the best out of me. I remember staring out the same window I'm looking out right now, Peter, in tears, hating my job, hating it. I hated it. And I had always loved seeing patients. And even now, it chokes me up a little
Hmm.
bit to think about that moment. How do we go from somebody who wants to give and give and give to the point where they're so fed up, they're ready to quit?
Hmm.
And that's where I was in 2019. And then the straw that broke the camel's back, if you will, I had some pay withheld because I had two charts that were open. And I was like, that's it. This is insane. I was ready to quit. My CEO gave me some time off. I took it. But when I came back, I was not the same. I was not the same young, confident physician that I was before. I was broken to a large degree. And it really took probably a good 2 years to recover from that. And that's when the writing process started. And it was a bit of catharsis for me as a start. I wrote a poem called Medicine is a World of Gray, kind of a dark look at primary care, if you will. And then I wrote a poem called, or not a poem, but a chapter called Anatomy of Burnout. And in that chapter, I really describe, so when a physician is struggling and burning out, how does it affect not just them, but their family, their friends, their colleagues, and least of which that huge circle of patients they're caring for? I mean, it is negatively impacting thousands of people when that is going on. And you talk about quality effects, you talk about costs, all these other things. Um, so from there, the book took a very amazing turn, in my opinion, when my co-author got involved, Joshua Judy. He had been one of my patients for a long time, and he had been struggling, and I was running out of ideas for him to really get him out of the deep place that he was. And I told him about the project, and I suggested he write something. Literally, my prescription that day, Peter, was 2 words: just write. And he did, and it was amazing. And we had a meeting, and then the magic kind of happened from there. So
Oh, it's pretty neat. Well, and I think what you're describing is relatable to, I would say, virtually 100% of physicians. People who have spent years and years of their life with this idea in mind. If I finish this training, I'll be an attending physician. I'll be able to make a difference. I'll be able to call the shots. And then sometimes you get into the reality of it, and especially if you work for a corporation or for a hospital or for somebody, you may realize that you don't have all that level of control. And then sometimes people feel just this, I don't know, moral injury, burnout situation developing, and I've noticed it myself. Like when especially when I'm very tired, if I haven't had a sleep for a long time, or if somebody's uh, making it so I lose my autonomy, you start to just feel frustrated and empty and depersonalized and all those things that kind of come with burnout. And it's becoming increasingly recognized. But I would venture to say that by the time a physician is in his or her 40s, I'll bet almost everybody has experienced burnout at some point during their career. It's a very common, unfortunately, very common condition in our field.
I agree with you 100% actually, and I think we're starting to see about it and talk about it a lot more. But I think that speaks to the systemic sickness that we live in our healthcare system. I mean, there are problems top to bottom, in our for-profit fee-for-service world that need to be unwound, and it's not going to happen quickly, right? There's a lot of work to do around this. I think the good news is there's hope. There's lots of many amazing organizations out there that are working on these things. I'm impartial to Medicine Forward because I'm quote unquote the lead catalyst. So I'm standing up, showing everybody my shirt. I'm taking my
Medicine,
shameless plug.
medicine forward. There you go.
Medicine Forward. And actually, you know what? The mission statement is catalyzing positive change so patient physician relationships can flourish. So we're not looking to take over every project. We are looking to be an accelerant to a lot of the other amazing things that are going on out there in this country. But yeah, we've got this huge component of learned helplessness where people feel like I'm one person. What can I do? What really difference can I make in this mess that we live in, right? And I would make the counterpoint that you're not alone. I would make the case that a vast majority of people who are in healthcare delivery are struggling at one time or another, and ask questions, push into the pain a little bit, see who else is out there, find a colleague, find an advocate, find somebody you can work with, and then you get some momentum, then you get some traction, and then you can make some amazing things happen. I'll give maybe one simple example of this. I won't name names, but an insurance company decided that it would be a good idea for one of our quality metrics to be a survey on medication reconciliation as to how well the patients thought we did with MedRec. Okay, a lot to unpack here, so I'll make it simple. MedRec is extremely important to know what medications patients are taking, but I would make the case that surveying that and then tying that into compensation is a dangerous, slippery slope, especially when the patient might be taking the little white pill and the yellow blue pill
Right, they
and the
don't know.
green purple pajama pill or whatever you
Some
want
of
to
them,
come up
some of
with,
them are
right?
very tuned in, but a lot of people really are that level. I don't know. It's the yellow pill. I'm not sure which one, Doc.
Yeah, Doc, you should know. Well, of course. Okay, so I digress a little bit. So the point I was trying to make is I basically said, I'm not doing this. I said, this is a bad idea. This is a dangerous, slippery slope to create bad behaviors in our clinicians for a whole host of reasons. And I pushed back and sent an email. Lo and behold, there was a whole bunch of us that pushed back and sent an email. And that insurance company decided it was a bad idea and took away that quality metric. The point I'm trying to make is these frustrations, we're not alone in these. And I think the more we talk about it, the more we say, hey, what about this? Or are you okay? Or checking in on your colleague might lead to an amazing discussion that leads to some positive change. And that's really what we need.
Hmm. Yeah, I want to expound a little bit on that idea of learned helplessness. I think, again, back to the idea of when you're a young student, in your 20s, you have these big aspirations and big ideals, and like all of us go through that process, and at the end of it, we feel we'll be empowered to make a big difference for our patients, and we'll be respected among our peers, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of that does happen, but as you pointed out, people sometimes learn that they learn to feel helpless. I can't control it because the administration says yada yada. I can't control it because insurance company X says I have to do this, or some other outside factor makes it so that you can't make the difference in the life of the person who's sitting in front of you. And sometimes you just can't because the medical situation is so complicated, or our technology is not such that we can solve somebody's problem But that concept of learned helplessness, I think that's kind of an interesting one. Do you have any more comments on that? As you've learned that particular thing, and as you've kind of found your way out of that hole?
Yeah, and I might maybe I'll take the twist on it here. You had mentioned sort of that arrival fallacy when you get out of medical school and you think you're into residency, everything's going to be great, and well, maybe it's not as great as we thought, and you get out of there and there's more work when you're attending, and so on and so forth. And it always seems like you're running from something to the next endeavor, if you will. And I think learned helplessness comes into play, and it's along the lines of being tied into moral injury in my mind. So moral injury is that notion that, well, maybe the simplest way to describe it is death by a thousand cuts, right? Everything you just described, you want to do what's best and right for the patient. You want them to get better. You want to make the best decision you can using all of your experience and knowledge base and what have you. But you've got all these speed bumps or hurdles or walls to providing that care. If that happens once in a while, okay, fine. But when that's happening like every day, all the time, after a while, you just get so beat down trying to do the right things for patients and struggling to do so that you feel helpless. And that's that learned helpless. It goes back to maybe a good example. Another good example is that, and I'm not advocating we shock dogs or animals or other things, but there was an experiment back in the day, and I don't even remember who did it, but they had dogs in this cage and they were shocking them, and they got shocked so much that they just kind of gave up. Even when the door was open to escape that area where they were getting shocked to an area where they wouldn't get shocked, they just laid there and took it. And I think that's what's happened to a lot of our colleagues, whether we're talking about physicians or nursing or whoever. We're so frustrated and beat up. We just lay there and take it. All right, what's the next hit? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what I'm going to do. I have to go home and chart for 4 hours at night and pajama time. And that attitude is being taken advantage of too, right? Here's one more box to check, Dr. Crane. Oh, it's just one more box. Just check this box. Why is my note 17 pages for someone who's got a cold?
Right.
Like, why? Like, what are we doing here? Like, where's the logic in that, right? And so, a big part of what I do now is a lot of the work with advocacy and connecting with these groups and, writing the book was to try and offer hope, because the vast majority of us went into this profession, we didn't go into it to, become uber rich or whatever you want to describe. We went in to help other people. And I think when you can get that joy back and realize that there are many of us out there and connect and create that community and those bonds, it creates energy, it creates momentum, it creates enthusiasm. And when we can figure out to harness all that power, not just from clinicians, but patients too, to make change, that's when we're really going to see the needle move. And so that's some of what I'm excited about, and so on and so forth. Currently, Peter, I get all fired up in these things, and I just start talking and going on. So please say, "Hey, Todd, you've answered the question. Let's move
No,
on."
no, this is good. And like I said at the beginning, you're a passionate guy, and I can tell. And and I think a lot of people go into medicine with a tremendous amount of passion, and the passion is usually directed toward patient care and being this lifelong learner and all the different things. And all that stuff is still there, even when you peel away all the things that seem to not matter or the things that detract from it. If you get down to the core, most people are still very passionate about caring for their patients and the
Hmm.
core reasons why they became physicians, but they get beat down, or this learned helplessness, like you said, or moral injury. There's lots of different concepts that kind of go into the burnout factor. And in your book, I know you talked a bunch about this journey of hitting burnout, having to take some time away, and then as you came back, you said, "What would my ideal practice look like, and how did you build that?" I was curious that part. When you did come back, you were able to kind of put the pieces in place that said, "Hey, this is what it should look like," and certainly not perfect because there is no perfect system. But I'm curious how you went through that process of learning what was important to you and to your patients as you designed a practice that was a little bit more meaningful.
Wow, for those of you seeing this, you could probably see me just light up when I even think about that time of seeing patients. It was magical, and I think there was an underlying theme to that, which if you read Ripple of Change, you'll see. I talk about the quadruple aim, and I'll definitely get back to describing the office because I have just great memories of that. But the quadruple aim, or in the book we call it our quadruple aim: patient experience, quality care, lower cost, provider wellness. You might not like the word provider, pick a different one. Doesn't matter to me. Wellness is the key. When you use those four tenets in making decisions, typically the majority of stakeholders win. And patients are happy, clinicians are happy, revenue's coming in, outcomes are good. I've seen it work at the clinic level, the hospital level, the ACO level. I'd love to see it at more of a national level, using that framework, if you will, to make decisions. So when I came back from burnout, I'm like, I am not doing that again. I am not going through burnout again. I don't care what it takes. We're going to have fun in the office. We're going to do the best job we can. And if there are decisions, hard decisions that need to be made to stand up for myself and my nurse practitioners or my staff, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to take a bit of a risk, for myself to do so. So, doing that, we interviewed a bunch of brand new nurse practitioners right out of school because I didn't want any bad habits coming in, and the administration thought I was nuts wanting 3 brand new grads, and I'm like, bring it on, I'll do it. I want to teach. I like an open door policy. I want them to learn. I want them to be good clinicians. And there were some bumps in the road because it's tough when you're right out of school. There's some tears at times probably, but in the
Yeah.
end, it was magic. We had 6 exam rooms for 4 clinicians. So instant bottleneck, right? In a busy clinic, but we made it work. There were times when in my flea market of an office, if you will, with Lego figures and Spider-Man pillows and all this other stuff adorning the area, we would have 2 nurse practitioners sitting in the chair, me sitting in my chair, and the third one sitting on the floor, Indian style, because they wanted to be part of the conversation reviewing cases. That's the kind of culture we had. We didn't lose anybody at that office, or rarely. Retention was through the roof. We were busting at seams with patients, and it was good. It was profitable. It's how medicine is supposed to be done. And in the book, I called it the office utopia because in my mind, it was for the most part a utopia. I loved being at work. The days would fly by, and not only that, but my charting was done when I walked out the door. And there were some reasons for that. I won't get into the weeds. But in the world that is fee for service, it's never enough. We want you open. We were open in the evening, Monday through Thursday, and we would have a little bit of time on Friday for one of the clinicians to cover the office, do refills, answer messages, and everybody else would be able to catch up on their paperwork and stuff. And that protected time was massive for the staff. It was a trade-off for the evening hours or whatever, but there was this push that we had to see patients till 5 p.m. on Friday. And I'm like, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to do it. Like, I've been here for 13 years. I've done everything under the sun. This office is working despite the limitations you put on us. We've had 0 turnover and you're still pushing for more. And I pushed back. And we never did open on Friday afternoon. That went on for probably about a year and a half. And there was tensions that were developing because I basically was creating a bit of a bubble around the office with the higher level executives or C-suites that were coming down with all these initiatives that they thought were a great idea, but ultimately were going to be, in my opinion, less than ideal for the staff and for patient care. It came to a tipping point in August of 2022 when a CEO and a VP came in and said, "Hey, we got a great idea. We can save money on rent. We're going to move your clinic back to the town you got burned out." And
Back
I'm
to the
like,
same place where you had experienced all your
yeah,
previous career and the burnout and all the
same building,
frustrations. Same
same
building, in
building.
fact. Goodness.
Yeah. So tell me what kind of trauma I would have walking in the door every day going back to that place, right? I go home, I told my wife, she started crying. I literally resigned the next morning. And I'm not suggesting that everybody resign and just walk away like that. I think there's lots of other ways to do it where you could get a coach, you could develop a plan. I was in a financial position to do so and to really draw a line in the sand. And I think it made a very powerful statement, if you will. But I think it also speaks to all that work, all that effort to make something magical can be blown up in a heartbeat with dollars driving the decision. That X amount that would have been saved on rent honestly went flying out the window the next year by a factor of 4 to 5, if not more, because the system lost 1 physician, 2 nurse practitioners, and I think 6 of the ancillary staff left the system completely when that clinic closed. 9 out of the 15 people that worked there left.
Yeah, it's frustrating. I shared with you before we hit record. Um, I just I've observed, and maybe you've probably heard the phrase before. If you do a really good job on something, people will give you lots of pictures of George Washington to say thank you, and I think that's accurate. And we've observed that in my practice. The more we just focus on taking care of patients and making sure our staff are happy to be there and build this culture around caring for patients first and letting that be the driver, the more people honor that, the more referrals come in, and the more people refer their friends and family, the better retention we have. And I looked back over time when we've had administrators who were really good and focused on patient care. And we had an administrator once that really was focused on dollars and cents and not very focused on the patient care aspect of it. And during that time when everybody was so frustrated with that particular administrator, was focused on money, money, money. How are we going to be efficient and make more money and do all these things? But when we looked at the finances before he was there and after he left, the time we made the least money was when we focused on the money. It was actually we made the most money as a clinic and as a system when people took care of patients and put that as our number one priority. And I suspect that most systems would find the same thing if they put physician, healthcare provider wellness as one of the driving factors that helps determine whether or not you're successful. I think you'd find that the finances would follow. And we have to exist in the system that we're in. But I think that's a really powerful concept that if you don't heal the healers, if you don't take care of those people who are out there doing the work, the rest of it just doesn't matter as much.
I agree with you 100%. And there's actually quite a bit of data supporting this. I don't have an article to quote right now, but the studies show that when your staff is in a good place with wellness and not burned out, the downstream effects are significantly more cost effective. So really your total cost of care is going down, whether it's reducing errors, increased quality, reduced mistakes, iatrogenic events, what have you, but least of which is physician retention. I mean, it is not cheap to get a new physician in, and then you lose all that revenue, if they leave from referrals and ancillary testing, et cetera. It is a no-brainer in my mind to keep your staff happy rather, and all the positives that emanate from that. The positive, I'll coin a phrase I like, the positive ripple effects that come from it. So I agree with you 100%.
Well, so on that end, what do you think are the ways to do that? Like, not everybody's going to have a clinic where they have this much autonomy. Not everybody's going to have the financial stability to step away and walk out right in the moment of when they're asked to change. What have you found to be effective ways to actually make those little changes in your own practice? Like some of it's systemic, some of it is your own personal, and like what can I do with the small sphere of influence that I have in my own life?
Sphere of influence is a great way to describe it. And I think the agency to advocate for yourself, your colleagues, or whatever is critical. I really think to maybe get up to a higher level of this as we're trying to climb the mountain, if you will. I think we need, how do I say this? We need more clinical leaders at the highest levels in our healthcare system, period. I would love to see a lot more physicians who are in prominent positions making these decisions. Some people think that you have to still be seeing patients. Maybe not. Probably depends on your ethos, I suppose. Or nurses, or respiratory therapists, or somebody that has cared for patients and literally checked boxes in an electronic health record, leading the way. We have to have that. I mean, we are delivering care to other human beings. That is our primary objective, or what should be our primary objective is. I'll give you maybe an example from my own life, a discussion I had with my wife about this. I was joking that maybe one day I would be a CEO of a hospital or something, not that I necessarily want to tackle that. And she says, well, you don't have an MBA. And I made a counterpoint and I said, well, I'm pretty sure the CEO of the system now isn't a physician, and we're taking care of patients. So you tell me who has the better idea of how to actually deliver that end product there. The person who knows how to run a business? And don't get me wrong, margins are important, but that should not be the primary thing that we are doing. I agree with you that if you deliver good care, take care of your people, the dollars will absolutely follow it. And I think those that have taken that calculated risk and done that, and there are examples out there of this happening, prove it day in and day out. They almost don't even have to worry about the finances because it just follows the happy patients that come rolling in the door. So back to the question, I think I would love to see leaders with MDs and RNs and other clinical initials behind their name leading the way.
No, that makes sense. As we design systems going forward, I hope that more students, like medical students and RNs and all the different healthcare professions. I hope that more people will choose to get a little bit of that business training so that they're a good natural fit for those things. In our own clinics, in the times, if you work in an ER, if you work in a clinic, if you're working in an OR, there's only so much you can really influence. And I found I can't really affect personally. I can't really go to Washington D.C. and say, "Hey, this is exactly what you need to do." I could
Totally.
I could go, but they wouldn't listen.
Right. He'd be standing out there. The
Hey,
two of us
listen
would
to
be
me.
standing out there. Hey, Peter,
Listen to
Todd, how are
me.
you?
Right. But what I found in my own sphere of influence, to go back to that phrase, is kind of the same things you talked about in your book. You alluded to is make it a culture of positivity and look out for patients and focus on them first. And when staff comes forward and says, "Hey, I'm not quite sure what to do with this situation," or "I need time off to take care of my family or my situation," I've just always been like, "Hey, family first. Do what's right for your family. Take care of these patients." And people sometimes get so frustrated, like, "Well, I got to stay after work and finish these prior authorizations and do all these extra things that don't really matter for. I mean, they matter for patients, but it doesn't really move the needle that much." And I've just always said, focus on you first. Focus on you as a nurse, as a doctor, as a person. Focus on the patient and what they need. That person sitting in front of you. And if those two things are met, I found that most people will respond to that, and they will work harder than they would if you set quality metrics and say you must work for this many hours and click this many boxes and do this many prior auths or this many refills or yada yada. And when people are fully committed to the idea of we're taking care of our patients first and we're taking care of ourselves and our families, people will go to the end of the I mean, they'll just do everything to be committed to that. We don't even have to say anything about it because they know they're part of that team. And you described that, when you designed your office utopia. I like that. But we can, to some degree, we can do that ourselves as we influence our peers and we influence in our own little sphere of influence, and hopefully we get involved with our state legislature and our national leadership and all those kind of things. But on a day by day basis, I think we can be a like you described in your book, this ripple of change where you say, I started here. I can't focus on everybody, but I can start on these 5 people I work with every day and make their lives a little better, and then just go from there.
Peter, I love that. And I'm going to, if I can continue the thread, I think I'm going to. Um, we talk about what kind of ripples or waves are you making? Are you throwing pebbles? Are you throwing little rocks? Probably at this case, for me, I'm probably throwing boulders at times in certain instances. And not everybody has that capacity, right? And I often talk about time, talent, or treasure as ways you can give back to help unwind that learned helplessness, if you will. Okay. Maybe it's in your office. You've got the talent to have a word of the day we used to do. Make it fun. I remember I used the
I was like Pee Wee Herman back when we were kids. The word of the
I'll,
day. That's
well, it was
awesome.
fun. It was great. And actually, one of the funniest times I had, Peter, I used the word capitulate.
Uh-huh.
And one of the MAs goes, she didn't know what it meant. She goes, "I give up." And I said, "You win," because that's what it means. And
Nice.
everyone just started laughing. We had a great time. But the point I was trying to make is I think there's lots of ways you can do this with time, talent, and treasure, right? And you're right. Not everybody can go to Washington, D.C. or get involved with legislation or policy changes. Or we're working on a documentary right now to really pull back the curtain on a lot of these issues. I'm not going to spill the beans, but follow me on LinkedIn. More to come with that one. But say, skip your cup of coffee one day in the morning. Send that $5 to an organization that you believe in, that's doing work to advocate for the majority of us out there. So my point I'm trying to make is there's lots of ways to give back and make a difference. Imagine if 300 million people skipped their cup of coffee in the morning and donated to one organization. What is that? 1.5 billion? Is that right?
A lot.
1.5 billion dollars would be in the kitty for whatever org that would be to lobby for positive change for the majority of us. That's the power of synergy and additiveness, adding things together and all these other things that I'm talking about. So yeah, and reach out. Maybe you need mentoring. Connect with Medicine Forward. There's all kinds of wonderful groups out there. Kern National Network, the Lorna Breen Foundation. The list goes on and on and on of amazing organizations that might be in your wheelhouse, what you like to do. Maybe you do like policy stuff. Go to Doctors for America. big organization that was founded by our prior Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy. So yeah, lots of cool things. And reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm very good at pointing people in directions. So
Yeah.
just I'd be
Well,
happy to chat with you.
another one I've found is our local state like family medicine board of director. Like that's been a really useful tool. So every state has an academy of, your state academy of family physicians or your state academy of whatever specialty you're at. And that's another positive group. They can't change everything, but I've found that when you speak as a united voice and say, "Hey, these policy things are actually not driving the outcomes you're looking for, but here's something that would," that united voice has been that's something that's reachable, attainable for everybody. And then, like you say, there's a bunch of national organizations that are seeking for change, and so there are ways to get involved that don't require you to quit your job and change everything, but just a little bit of time to move forward.
Yes, please don't misconstrue what I'm saying that I want everybody to quit their job and do what I'm doing. And I'm not advocating for that at all. I think you make a good point, though, Peter. What I'm seeing though with these groups, and I think a lot of them are starting to realize this, is all these organizations have wonderful identities and things they want to work on, right? But there is power in that collaboration. If we can find certain topics, say reducing physician suicide, for goodness sakes, and get these organizations to work together and hold hands and come up with projects to educate the American people at large. Wow. Wow. Is there some power in that kind of thing? So,
No, it's I guess the biggest message of all is just don't feel stuck. Oops. Don't feel stuck, because if you get where you're stuck and you don't feel like there's a way forward, that's when burnout happens. At least in my experience, if I feel like there's no hope, I can't fix it, I'm powerless, I have somebody who doesn't know what they're doing telling me what to do, I don't have enough sleep, I don't feel like I can change it, that lack of power and the ability to inability to change things is really a big driver for burnout. And then when you couple it with not getting enough sleep and doing your very very best and being rewarded with nothing, or you can't really make the change you want to make, people feel so frustrated. And so we're all these things you're talking about are specific things that every one of us could go out and do today. Say I can join an organization that's advocating for physician wellness. I can be a part of my board of my specialty within my state. I can make a change to the nurse or the receptionist or other people I work with. Like those little things are like kind of like all the stuff you talked about in your book. That is the ripple of change, and I like that title because it enables you to make a fairly small contribution, and it can have a ripple effect that affects lots of people.
I'll tell you another story. I guess I'm full of stories today, Peter.
I like the stories. They're good.
So Joshua, my co-author, and I, as we were going through the process of writing the book, I was, for whatever reason, stuck on our quadruple aim, which I think is a wonderful framework, right? But had that been the title, I don't think that would have landed with as many people. And to Joshua and his wife Megan's credit, they kept kind of putting up the obstacle, like, Todd, that's not the right title. Like, let's keep thinking this through. It's going to hit us, and it's going to hit us. And then one day it did. The ripple of change. And the funny part of it, Peter, neither Joshua nor I can remember who came up with the title.
Oh, interesting.
And I think there's some beauty and some magic in that in and of itself. Like just that relationship between the two of us and the positive effect we had on one another. Um, I think just it just felt right when that came up. It was like, oh, that's it. That was the eureka moment. Like this is the title, and it's kind of become the identity too of the project, if you will. Like you don't have to do everything. You can just do one little thing to make your sphere of influence better. And when your sphere of influence is better, the people next to you are like, well, I want that too. I want what they're doing over there. How do I do that? What do I do? Maybe you have a rainbow unicorn above your desk when you come back from vacation.
Nice.
So all these little things can make a huge, huge difference.
Well, I tell patients all the time when we're talking about their health care or something that they're going to pursue for trying to get better from some illness or problem. I always say, I've got all these studies, but nobody ever studied you. And your particular situation is unique. Nobody ever
Love
studied
that.
you. And and I think it's the same for physicians. Nobody else is you. Nobody else sits in this chair in front of that patient in that location in that day, and you get to be you. They didn't hire Dr. X, they hired you. And you're hired for that position, you're hired in that place, or you've started your own business. you are uniquely you, and you can draw from the experience of others, published in studies or through your lived experience. But ultimately, what informs that decision is you. You are uniquely your own personal self, and your ability to help care for the person in front of you is not going to be replicated exactly by anybody else. And so, if you are able to give of yourself in that moment, the person chose to come to you as a physician, or maybe you're in the ER and they found themselves in front of you, even if they didn't know who was going to be on the emergency room or something like that. But you can be there 100% for that person, and in that moment, at that time, you have all the influence in that particular situation of what happens. And I found that to be empowering for myself to say, okay, I can't fix everything outside, but for this person at this moment right here, everything else doesn't matter. We're going to focus on what works for this person's scenario and for this person's situation. And I found that to be empowering, like I say, for me as a physician, and patients seem to resonate with that idea that, okay, it's about me at this time, a plan that works for my particular situation. And I would submit that that could probably be replicated across almost every specialty of medicine as you devise unique plans for our different patients and the different scenarios we come across.
Peter, I totally agree with you, and I'd like to maybe add to it even, you know, if that isn't working and you're struggling, just as a reminder, you're unique, you are important, you have power, you have agency, you are loved, and there are people out there that want to help.
Mm.
It breaks my heart. I talk about physician suicide a lot, but I don't think people are aware that we lose a doctor a day in this country on average to suicide. That is appalling to me. So if you're listening to this and you are struggling, please reach out to a colleague. Reach out to me, reach out to Peter. We'll point you. We might not have the answers, but we will try and help you as best we can and point you in the right direction. So I just felt like it was important to say that. I don't know why.
No, I want to
Um,
reflect. I want to bounce off that too, Todd. Like, I think everybody can reflect, can think back to a day where you stared out the window and cried. It doesn't matter if you're a big tough guy or if you're a person that cries all the time. I'll bet everybody can point to a time when they say, I felt overwhelmed, I didn't know what to do, and I felt useless and undervalued, and I'm not even sure what my next step could even be. But I want to echo what Todd just said. Like, you matter, and what you do matters, and the person who comes to you as a physician and places their trust in you for those few minutes, that interaction mattered to them so much. I've talked on this podcast a bunch about my own health struggles, and I just can't even express the degree of gratitude I felt for those physicians, and I still feel for the physicians and the other healers who have helped me. And it's not just something to say. Like, I just went through that, and I just remember feeling this powerful feelings of gratitude and saying, these are people who have dedicated thousands and thousands of hours so that they could be ready to care for me at this time when I need them. And I think our patients continue to feel that when we give that same level of care to them. And we need to make sure we heal the healers and take time for ourselves and make sure that we come with our glass full and our ability to care for patients ready and able to go. But at the same time, we need to recognize how much that really means to the person who's sitting in front of you.
100%. There's so much we could talk about. I think the thing that lands with me is, healthcare delivery is about taking care of other human beings. That sacred moment, that sacred bond that occurs between a physician and a patient. It's a beautiful, magical thing, and healing can come from just words. We talk about the relationship between patients and physicians. That is a sacred thing. There is so much power in those interactions, and the healing can come from literally just words. It doesn't need to be a prescription. It doesn't need to be a surgery. I think back to when I was talking with Joshua when he was struggling, and frankly, we had tried just about everything under the sun. I told him, Joshua, I believe you're going to get better, but you have to believe it too. And that was a turning point for him from a deep, dark place that he said, you know what, I've got to try some different things. And it was a long climb out of where he was, but it definitely improved. And I'm not saying everything is going to be fixed just with words, but I think it speaks to the power that exists in medicine. We are taking care of other human beings, and that needs to be forefront.
Yeah.
It cannot be the almighty dollar.
Yeah, I just want to underline, double exclamation point, highlight that. Like that is what has to be. That's why we became doctors. It's why we're still doctors. And if healthcare systems design around that idea that it's patient first and care first, the dollars will come. They'll be okay. We have to make sure we don't drive ourselves into financial ruin. But if our healthcare system is all about profit and the mighty dollar, we we lose track of what makes doctors doctors and patients patients. And I love what you talked about. That's such an important thing.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I got to push on you just a little bit on the
Uh oh.
financial part of this, just a little bit. I want to. I think this is pretty cool, Todd. That, like I said at the beginning, you have set up your financial house such that when it came time that there was something that was going to lead you back down that road of burnout, you were able to say, "Okay, I'm done, and I'm switching gears to do something that is different. Still taking care of patients, still advocating for better lives of physicians, but you left that clinic, and you couldn't have done that had your if you were just in debt up to your eyeballs and your financial game hadn't been played well. I don't know that I would advocate for everybody to invest in Bitcoin because if you invest 100% of your stuff in Bitcoin and it crashes, that's a little bit hard. But I wanted to hear a little bit how did you do that, and how did your loved ones react to to that? Because it worked out awesome, but it's also one of those kind of high risk things.
So, well, that's interesting. I think, interestingly enough, it wasn't actually, although I do own Bitcoin and Ethereum and a whole host of other cryptocurrencies,
Right.
if you will. The company, and not trying to, it was called Telcoin, and it was a much lower market cap. And so when things start to become successful and they take off, it's not percentage yields. It starts to become the factor yield, like X yields, that sort of
Right.
that S curve going up. What I would suggest individuals is, there are a lot of amazing opportunities out there. Change happens, whether we want it to or not. And the biggest opportunities are often related to things that are going to change our world. Blockchain technology is one of those things. For those of you that don't understand what blockchain technology is, I probably won't do it as much justice as I would like to, but it's a decentralized distributed ledger based on math, a permanent record of whatever you put in that particular block. It is absolutely brilliant. And ultimately, we're going to see all kinds of utility for it, whether it's in the financial world. There are countries out there that are using blockchain technology to put medical records on them. So you have a permanent medical record. So we're not faxing things to everybody under the sun. Imagine getting rid of fax machines in your clinic or your ER or whatever, right? So but I think what people understand is they think it's sort of this Ponzi scheme of, growing money on trees, or another era of the tulip rave or whatever that was, hundreds of years ago, the tulip, where people were buying tulips for ridiculous amounts of money. The reality is there is real substance behind what's going on here. And I think if you do your due diligence, there are companies and products and tokens that aren't going away. Like Bitcoin is not going away. Bitcoin is a store of value. There is a finite limit to it, and people are understanding the value of it, why you've seen this appreciation over time. And now that countries are adopting it and talking about it, using it as a store of value for other institutions, et cetera, that's not going away. And there's example after example after example of cryptocurrencies that are going to be here. But that's not how people see it. They see it as, pictures of frogs, or they think of FTX and the collapse and all these other bad things that happen. If you look back at like companies like Apple, and I'm going off memory here, when Apple came out and peaked its first cycle, it dropped, I think, like 80-90% after that. When you believe in a company and you see a drop like that and you're thinking long term, what I tell with my investment buddies, and we talk about this all the time, and I guess maybe because I'm a doctor, when there's blood in the streets, that's when you should be looking for those opportunities and buying. So, learn more about it. Dig into it, ask questions, reach out to me. I'll point you in certain directions and tell you what I think is interesting or not. But those are the opportunities that if you have the intestinal fortitude to not freak out if something's going down 20-30%, and to then be buying more at that point, if you believe in the product, when it goes the other way, your return is massive.
Yeah. Well, and I think as I think about designing a good financial structure, I think there's probably a place for some of the cryptocurrency. I wouldn't recommend somebody to take all of their assets and put it all, just like we wouldn't recommend any to put all of
Yep.
your assets in any particular class. But it is a good idea, especially in those early stages of the career, to try to invest wisely and carefully so that when the time comes that you experience the need to change your career, you can do so without too much change. And I, whether it be the strategy you described or others, I think the biggest message is for people to save. Keep on saving, keep on investing, putting things aside, and you can use the tool. You can use the stock market, you can use Bitcoin, you can use real estate. Every one of those tools can be effective, but it's just the concept of get rich slow and just keep being after it again and again and again, so that you have that stuff in place. And then I think as physicians, you're sort of freed from you're freed from all these external forces that are trying to control you, and you say, okay, I'm doing this because I love patients, because I love taking care of the people who have entrusted me with their lives, and I can keep doing that because I don't have these external forces working on me. But if you don't play your cards correctly in the early stages, a lot of people find themselves with further indebtedness, and then rather than being able to say it's time to make a change, they say I have to carry on, even though I would rather make a change.
Agreed. And I think, some not overspending, fiscal responsibility, especially early on in your career, saving up that nest egg. But then, even to take it one step further, finding other streams of revenue with passive income is very important. Whether it's real estate, whether it's there are passive income streams associated with crypto, whether it's there's some passive income with writing books and these kinds of other things, or speaking engagements, whatever. There's other ways to get income that might fill up your cup. You just have to do the work. You're bright, as I said before. You're unique, you're loved, you've got skill sets you probably don't even realize, and those can lead to opportunities if you're looking for them. So keep your eyes open.
No, and it's good. I think it's a good thing to kind of emphasize here at the end that as we do all these things, you want to be able to continue to be this force of change, ripple of change, like the book. You still want to be able to do all those things throughout every different chapter of your career. And I don't think people should feel guilty when it's time for a new chapter. Sometimes people will go through and say, well, I envisioned I was going to be this kind of physician in my 30s, and therefore I'm always going to be that. It's okay to be different in your 40s than you were in your 30s, and different in your 50s than you were in your 40s. And you can still continue to make a difference and use that skill set. I don't think it means that you have to lay that skill set of a physician aside and throw it all away. You just use it different over different chapters of life. And having a financial house in order will allow you to do that as you follow your intuition and inclinations of what you're good at and what opportunities present themselves.
Totally agree. I think there's lots of ways to have impact, whether it's with direct patient care, whether it's with advocacy, writing books, working with colleagues, coaching, all kinds of things that you can do that still are giving back and making the world a better place.
Yeah. Todd, this has been perfect. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I feel like I've learned a lot, and I think our guests will enjoy that. Will listen to this and be motivated to make changes. And hopefully, if you want to read the book Ripple of Change, I encourage you to go read it. I read it, and I thought it was a fascinating read from someone's real lived experience by Dr. Todd Otten. And Todd, do you have any other thoughts or questions or advice to leave with our audience today?
Absolutely. I'll leave one piece of advice and then I'll put maybe a couple ways people can get a hold of me. I think early on in the career, advocating for yourself and learning to say no is an important thing. We as physicians often are taught to say yes, 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 and that's all well and good till it's not. And when it's not, it can be a disaster. So learn to set your boundaries and stick to them. If you want to get a hold of me, probably the best way to do it is on LinkedIn. Ripple of Change is available on multiple platforms. If you want to get a signed copy, go to rippleofchange.us. But the biggest project that I'm excited about is the documentary that we've got in the works that I think is going to be amazing. I don't want to give too many spoilers to it, so I'm going to try and give an evergreen approach here. But if you are interested in learning more or participating, reach out, connect with me. Love to have a chat with you. And Peter, I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate the care that you're giving in the rural setting. And I think that's amazing. So great job.
Yeah. Thanks, Todd. We'll talk later. Thanks for tuning into the Doctors Making a Difference podcast. And thank you for what you do to help your patients and your community. Your work truly helps so many people. We produce this content to help you have the tools you need to stay in medicine and to highlight the amazing work being done by physicians around the world. Please note that while I am a physician, and many of the guests on this program are also physicians or other professionals, the discussions on this podcast do not represent my employer or any professional organizations to which I belong. This podcast is for your information and entertainment only, and should not be taken as professional advice. You should seek appropriate professional advice pertaining to your own situation. Please check out more of our content on our website, doctorsmakingadifference.com. Also, please follow, like, or subscribe on your podcast player or YouTube channel, and give us a 5-star rating. It really helps to spread the message. Finally, if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, or if you'd like to nominate someone else to be a guest, please visit the website or email admin@doctorsmakingadifference.com. See you next time.